I'm a nobody from nowhere that ain't never done nothing. That's what I am. An old head. These young coaches, I tell you what, I can't figure these jokers out. They got a backpack on and tight something. I don't know what they're doing. They're getting on my nerves, I can tell you that. I know what ain't in the backpack. A string and a let me paint that line for you. That ain't in there. That's for sure. I had a kid the other day. He said, "Hey, Coach, didn't Christopher Columbus write the Pledge of Allegiance?" I said he sure did. He also played quarterback for the 1985 Chicago Bears. He said, "Bet." That happened. Sun Coaches, Season 6, where coaches come and tell their stories. Some of them are funny. Some of them is going to help you in your coaching journey. Not everybody has a funny story, but everybody has a story. Hope you enjoy Sun Coaches, brought to you by Titan Sensor. Sun Coaches is proud to partner with Titan Sensor for Season 6 and 7. Titan is made in the USA, proudly founded and based in Texas. When you connect with Titan, you are not alone. You can collaborate and share templates with other coaches across the country to build reports and foster competition. Used by programs such as State 6A, Georgia State Champion, Grayson High School, Titan can tailor a package to fit your needs. The eye in the sky never lies. Improve your team's performance with Titan. Welcome to Sun Coaches Podcast, Season 6, and I'm delighted to be joined by the head coach at Kings Ridge Christian School, Coach Coach Slaney. Thanks for being on with us.
Thanks, Coach. I appreciate the opportunity to be on here with you.
Well, Coach, I know that you've been a private school guy most of the time, but like we do with everybody, tell us where you actually grew up and went to school.
Yeah, for sure. So as a kid, we moved a lot when I was a kid. We moved actually 6 times before I was in the 5th grade, all around the country. And so my dad was in the hospitality and like hotel restaurant management business. So we moved to Atlanta, specifically Tyrone, Georgia, about 15 minutes south of the airport when I was going into 5th grade. And so I was in Sandy Creek District back in the early 2000s, which was a great time to be there. Coach Walker was there, and Calvin Johnson was a junior and senior my 5th and 6th grade year. So going on Friday nights and getting to watch him play and kind of having that kind of a guy, in the program, and especially in the program that I grew up kind of starting out in, was really cool and special to see and be a part of during that. So grew up in Tyrone, Georgia, played all the different sports, played football, basketball, baseball, did a little bit of soccer too, oddly enough, but did some of that. And, went to Flat Rock Middle that fed into Sandy Creek, was part of their program in 7th and 8th grade. And the plan was for me to go to Sandy Creek. And then, my parents decided academics were always top priority to my parents, kind of with everything. And so we had a neighbor in our neighborhood who actually taught at a small private school in Noonan, Georgia called the Heritage School. And so my parents kind of started talking to her a little bit, and they actually were happening to start their football program as I was going into my freshman year. And we were encouraged to come check it out and just kind of see what was going on there. And so ended up going there and being part of their first ever football team in the fall of 2006. And that was a learning experience in coaching before I even was playing really yet. And just kind of being a part of that as a player and experiencing that, and, kind of the building from the ground up, literally in a lot of ways. And, so that was cool to be a part of. Ron Beecham was the head coach of that team. He'd been at Northgate. Before that, he was there for 2 years, and then went on to go, I think, to East Coweta to be their linebackers coach. So leaving head coach at a private school to go back into public school and doing that. And so my last 2 years, I was coached by Larry Harrison, a 2-tight double wing kind of connoisseur, and kind of continued running that and doing all that, and had an opportunity to be part of those playoff teams. The last 2 years that I was there, my junior and senior year, we made the playoffs for the first times in program history, and never got the playoff win, but kind of set the stage for some of the success that they were able to have later on in the early 2000 teens. And so, really liked my time. My parents are still down in Tyrone, but again, grew up around the game. My dad played high school football, my uncle. So, I mean, it was always something that, it was around the house playing backyard football and kind of, it was always the first sport. It was the first love, and so didn't necessarily expect to get into coaching right out the gate. But I can kind of save that for later on. But, it was a great experience. And again, learned a lot, even just about, being a part of a program for the first time, and learned a lot of great life lessons as a part of that. So,
yeah, I was coaching at Lithia Springs when Coach Beecham was the head coach at Northgate.
Yeah, okay.
And I remember when they opened the Heritage School.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually coached against Sandy Creek when you were in the 5th and 6th grade.
Okay, how'd y'all do?
Not too good, but not many people did. They had a really good team and really good players. But that's awesome. Grew up in a south side of Atlanta over there, and I've had some friends that live in the Noonan area that they've sent their kids to that school, and it's a great place to go to school. I've heard great academics and everything. So did you get an opportunity to play any sports at the college level, or did you just go to college?
Well, yeah. So I had some small D3 football opportunities, like Carnegie Mellon, LaGrange College, things like that. I ended up picking to go to Georgia Tech just as a student. Again, academics were always the top priority, and money was kind of a little bit of a factor when it came to college. And, D3 doesn't give athletic opportunities financially like that. And so, I literally waited. So you have to decide by May 1st on where you go to college. I waited till April 29th before officially deciding. I wanted to go to Carnegie Mellon, but the reality is it's a school up in Pittsburgh that at the time was about $53,000 a year to go to. So it was like, okay, I can go do that and play football and have to pay that amount of money, or that can cover the same amount of my entire time at Georgia Tech. And so, I kind of made that decision, as much as I loved playing and, wanted to keep playing, but the reality was just made sense academically and financially down the road to go to Georgia Tech. And so I went there and studied finance and psychology and, double major for a while. I ended up just getting the psychology degree and not the finance degree. It was kind of one of those things with coaching, because Georgia Tech does not have a teaching school, but I always knew I wanted to get into coaching down the road. Again, all my coaches are kind of older in their careers and kind of older in their time. And Coach Harrison himself was a community coach that didn't work in the building really, but he, my thought was I was going to quote, make my millions quote, and then get out and retire early and then get into coaching. Cause that's what I knew I wanted to do and loved doing, and teaching. I was, teaching Sunday school at my church and, just hadn't, whenever I could be like a camp counselor, I was all about it. Right. I just loved kind of that kind of, thing and teaching and coaching, just being around and trying to make an impact on younger people. And so they, long story short, I met a girl at Georgia Tech and, we were talking about kind of future and things like that. And, she was like, well, if that's what you want to do, like, why are you going to wait till you're in your 50s to do it? Right. Like, why don't you just go ahead and do it? And made a lot of sense. And so I married her, and so she's now my wife. And we are doing this coaching and teaching things together, in this. And so, I kind of dove right in and, again, without a teaching certification coming from Georgia Tech, I had an opportunity to actually go back to Heritage in 2015. And that was my first foot in the door with coaching and teaching, and kind of doing that whole thing and taught middle school math there while helping with the 4th through 6th grade football team, and then helping with the varsity team on Friday nights, just kind of spotting up in the box and doing things like that. And so kind of worked my way up from there and, kind of had that opportunity. But again, it was the opportunity I had and I was blessed with, and, just kind of ran with it. So
where did you go after Heritage?
Yeah. So when I was at Georgia Tech, I actually was working in their summer programs department for 5 summers while still in college. And so I'd kind of developed some relationships at Pace and had the opportunity to do some of that. And Coach Slade was over at Pace at the time. And, I don't think he knew that my interest was in coaching or that I had any kind of wherewithal about coaching and football. But, we just kind of would talk and stuff, as the football team was there for summer workouts while we had summer camps going on at Pace. And so about, a couple of years later, after Heritage, an opportunity came open at Pace to teach middle school computer science and robotics. And, kind of got an opportunity to jump into that. And so, I'd never moved out of Atlanta. My wife was a couple of years younger than me at Georgia Tech. We were still dating at the time, but so I was driving 50 minutes minimum each way down to Noonan from where I was in Atlanta. And so just being a little bit closer in Atlanta, kind of having those roots there, it was something that really appealed to me. And so went to Pace and got to work with Chris Slade and kind of all that. They'd won the state championship, I want to say in 15, in fall of 15. And so I'd gotten there in spring of 18. So that senior class that I was with were freshmen on that state championship team they'd had. So there was still some of that kind of culture and that kind of, mentality around, there was a group that still remembered what it was like to reach that. But, we were still kind of developing kind of the next level of the program there. So, so I had an opportunity to go there. I coached middle school football there, and then helped with the high school team a little bit more. By the time I left Heritage, I was fully in as a defensive line coach and on varsity while also helping with the middle school. I mean, those small private schools I was doing at one point at Heritage. I was middle school football head coach. I was varsity assistant coach with the defensive line. I was the varsity assistant boys basketball coach, and I was the middle school head track coach and the varsity assistant track coach all in the same year. And so,
there you go.
Those exactly. Hey, you got, those small private schools will run you down if you let them a little bit. And so, and I was just a younger guy that was, just jumping on every opportunity and experience that I could get, and just kind of learning what it meant to be a coach and how that, what my coaching philosophy was and, kind of what was authentic to me to a degree. And so, it was a great opportunity. It was a great place, but I mean, it was tiring, no doubt. But again, I learned a lot during those times and was able to take that to Pace where I did varsity football assistant, middle school assistant. And then I also coached track there as an assistant and was the 8th grade boys basketball head coach. So, I mean, again, private schools are all about, the more hats you can wear to a degree while doing a good job with all of them. They're going to, that's something that's appealing to a lot of private schools. And so, again, Pace was great and I loved it. And, it was a good fit for me and my wife at the time. And then through middle school football, I developed some connections to other private schools in the area. And so when I was coaching middle school football, the middle school head coach over at Holy Innocents was also the assistant AD. And so he reached out to me one day and said, hey, we got this quarterback, varsity quarterback coach position open. I've seen how you coach, would you be interested in talking about it? Well, I'd never coached quarterbacks before. Specifically, I'd never coached quarterbacks in triple option. And so, of course I said, yeah, sure, and went over there and talked to them and, was very transparent about my kind of lack of experience with that, but that I was willing to learn. And again, they knew that I knew how to coach and just my style and my energy around coaching and, was willing to jump right into it and kind of go from there. And so, Coach Winter brought me on staff and did a great job of all summer. We were meeting and kind of getting me up to speed on kind of everything with that and really being a great mentor with that. At that point I'd been, I always knew I wanted to be a head coach one day, but, I didn't know what the timeline looked for that or what God's plan was for me in that. But when I left Pace to go to Holy Innocents, I told Coach Winter, I said, I want to be a head coach one day. And, his promise to me was, look, I'm going to teach you everything. I'm going to open the book for you and show you everything that's going to take to be a head coach and, kind of help mentor you through this. And, he said, my goal for you is not to leave Holy Innocents until you get a head coaching opportunity. And, was with him for 3 years. I worked my way up to associate head coach and offensive coordinator with him. And, and then got the opportunity, and the call to come look at Kingsridge, and that was a blessing. That's been a blessing here. And, got here in January of 24, and, we're rocking and rolling and just trying to get better every day. So, but.
That's awesome. That is a great journey thus far.
Yeah, no, it's been, again, it's been awesome. I mean, again, I'm really thankful for, the coaches I've had the opportunity to work for. I've worked for 4 head coaches, and they have all been very, very different, but have all been successful. I've learned, different things from different ones, in terms of just how to treat your staff, how to love your players, how to build a 365-day program, and make it something that guys, young men want to be a part of, because I do think that's important. That's what I talk about all the time with our staff and players, is this idea of, I truly believe that people want to be a part of something bigger than themselves, and making sure that this is something that we think is making a positive impact, and that this is something that, young men in our school want to be a part of, and, get something out of it in a positive way to help them build into better young men and help them grow in their faith, specifically at Kingsridge Christian, being a Christian private school. So,
yeah, I was about to say, being a parochial, faith-based school, you probably go into it with a little bit different mindset and mentality than you would in the public school system. And you can do a little bit different things than some of the other guys can do. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. I'm thankful. Oh yeah. I mean, I'm thankful. I've been at 4 private schools. 2 of them were religiously affiliated and 2 of them weren't. And I loved, the 2 that weren't as well. And they were great. But there definitely was, you were limited in those things. And personally, I'm someone who shares their faith, and it's a huge part of my life and my journey. Because I really do believe I wouldn't be where I'm at right now if it wasn't for, God's intervention in a lot of different ways and different times to lead me on this path to glorify Him. So, it's been great to be at Kingsridge and be able to do that. And again, pour into these young men, both, as men, developing them on earth, but also spiritually and for their faith, long term as well. So,
oh, that's fantastic. So when you get to Kingsridge as the football coach, you've got all this plan, you've got the books been open for you at Holy Innocents. So what did you go in thinking was the first thing you needed to do?
So, Terry Crowder was at Kingsridge before me, and a lot of people know Terry. He's been around. He's a coaching legend, in my opinion, with everywhere he's been with Chattahoochee and Creekview and Denmark and starting that program. And, me and him talk every day still. He's been a great mentor. And we had talked some before I took the job about kind of where the program was at and what he felt, that's been and what it needs, to a degree. And he did a really good job of starting our feeder program. And that was something, frankly, that was very appealing to me about this job. And, just kind of understanding that, again, you got to have interest coming from the younger grade. You can't just start in 9th grade, And so it was one of those things where we were talking about it and just kind of some of the challenges he'd faced when he came in. And, I do think he left this program a lot better than when he found it. And, and then when I came in, the biggest thing I saw was a commitment, not just from 5 or 6 guys, but from the entire team to the weight room, and that was something I'd learned kind of at a few different spots, where that commitment to the weight room, not just by, again, your 5 or 6 guys who are all in and all about it all the time, but also, by everybody, even your multi-sport guys, and making it work with them, where you're not taken away from those other sports. Cause, at a private school, I think want to say 80% of our kids or so are probably multi-sport athletes, and so you really gotta make sure to be careful about how you're doing those things and how you're accommodating that, but also holding firm and committed to the fact that there has to be a commitment to the weight room year round, and that it's going to help all sports and getting that buy-in from all the coaches, which we've been blessed to have, but understanding that, again, it's going to help every single sport if they're in the weight room year round and developing as athletes in general, and not just a football player or a baseball player or a basketball player or whatever. And so the commitment to the weight room was top priority, and I always told people when I took the job that, I could sense a hunger in the interviews. I could sense a hunger from the panel. I could sense a hunger just on campus to do more and to be better. And again, it wasn't anything that Coach Crowder wasn't doing. I think he really fostered that and kind of got that hunger growing and going. And, then it was, I came in and was like, all right, it's time for us to feed that hunger a little bit and kind of get after it and, show that level of commitment that these guys are ready to show. And so I think that was our top priority. And then from there, just building, I feel the weight room builds, culture, obviously, but it builds belief, the sense that if we're getting stronger and they're seeing the improvements day to day and week to week, then they know it's going to translate over. They're going to see themselves bigger, faster, stronger. Where they hit that field, they don't see themselves as David going against Goliath anymore. And that's been a big thing, and that's been a big thing with this being my first full off season. Because again, I got there January 24 last year, and so it's been our first full off season as we're still, building this culture and kind of protecting this culture day after day here and continue to build it forward. But that commitment to the weight room, every single day. I mean, we had, an optional exam lift today, and we had our highest ever team attendance today, and we had our spring game on Friday. So, I mean, it's been the commitment to that and the energy around it has been great. And again, the kids are seeing the benefit and believing in it. So
it makes a difference. Coach Crowder, yeah, he's definitely legendary. I remember when he was one of the first to be recognized running a 3.5 when he was down at Camden back in the before times. He's a good dude.
Oh yeah, so we've talked a lot of 3-5 defense. So
yeah, that's his jam. He definitely knows it. That's for sure. So, Coach, we always talk about things that being a first-time head coach. You're prepared. You're head coach at Holy Innocents sat down and opened the book to you. You said, and X's and O's aren't really the problem. It's all the extra stuff that you have to deal with. What are some things that first year that you were just like, oh man, this is a little different, whether it was staff or kids? What were just some things that not necessarily you weren't prepared for, but just one of those things that you kind of have to experience to get the experience?
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely for sure. I mean, and it was definitely a little bit of a culture shock going from, the last two places I'd been had been, Pace and Holy Innocents, which are larger, more Buckhead type private schools. And, while they're still private schools, every school has a different culture, right? And especially kind of in that little pocket there, and going from Holy Innocents, where we had about 78 kids on the roster, to Kingsridge, where we had 28 kids on the roster when I arrived. There was definitely a little bit of that culture shock around just, that kind of piece of how many kids we were going to expect to have as we're trying to build that, this program and, just kind of everything with that. And I mean, I would say, I was definitely warned ahead of time. And again, Coach Crowder has been a great mentor in a lot of ways and really set the stage for what we've been able to do. And so, me and him had talked a little bit as I was coming in about some of the challenges he had experienced there and kind of what he foresaw as some challenges down the road. Of it. And I mean, one of them was just the level of the expectation by the kids and the community in terms of like what it means to be a part of a football program, right? And understanding that, yes, they want something to do on Friday nights, as a community, they want, to have a football team and to have this thing to rally behind, but are the kids willing to put in the work day in and day out, right? So, I mean, we definitely established that culture. It wasn't where it needed to be when I arrived, and, again, Coach Crowder was trending upwards in that when he stepped down. But, just kind of that level of understanding what it truly means to be committed to something bigger than yourself, and a part of that program, and understanding, I think a lot of times we feel that we are committed to something and that we have a commitment to it, but sometimes you don't realize how uncommitted you are to something until you realize how much more someone can demand and what that commitment could really look like, and I just think about other things in life too, as these guys get older and become men in society and in careers and things. And, I can say I'm committed to certain things or committed, in whatever it is, and then learn that, down the road that my commitment level could be so much higher and they could give so much more to something. And I think that was the biggest step kind of as we were taking it over. I think the second thing was just staff. Of the staff from the previous group, there were 6 coaches on staff, including Coach Crowder. And I'd met with each of them individually as I came in and kind of wanted to get their their pulse of the program at that point and see about their interest in continuing. And only one coach wanted to continue with the program, and that we thought would be a good fit. And so he's still on staff with us and does a great job. But the rest of the guys wanted to pursue other opportunities or just kind of, leave space for us to come in and shift this program culture a little bit. And so finding other coaches who are willing to stay at a program and be part of a rebuild. I'm sure, we all know that coaches and staff, just like anybody, want to be part of something that's successful and are happy to be a part of something that they've seen the success. But finding great men who are willing to make a positive impact on a young man, when it's kind of unknown, in terms of how we would be on the field, how it would be, frankly, with a young coach. I was 31 when I took the Kingsridge job, and, being my first spot, a lot of staff, they have to have some faith. They have to have some belief and trust in that head coach and the vision that I had for the program and that we have for the program as we're still changing this program culture. But, I think that idea of finding, great staff who are willing to, commit to being part of more than just a 1 year, kind of rebuild thing is, and we understood when we came in, this was going to be a multi-year culture shift of this program and that we're still in the middle of working on. And so finding staff that are willing to put in that work, both, like you mentioned, on the X's and O's are the easy part, for everybody, but willing to do all the little things off the field too, right? And, helping from all the game day logistics to all the practice prep to everything kind of in between as we're, teaching these young men, the basics of football too, to a degree in terms of when we're rebuilding this program, but also, guys that are willing to put in that extra work. And I'm not the guy that keeps the staff for 6 hours on a Sunday in person or anything like that, but they, that trust and that willingness to do their work and do their role, within the program for the betterment of the program and these young men. So that's probably been the two biggest things. I mean, every program has its challenges, and like you said, I came in from some great head coaches and learned a lot from them about the overall running a program. But until you're really in it, you just never know what the challenges are going to be at each program. So,
well, and that springboards right into my next question for you is when you come in, you sit down. I know we talked about it off air. Is your overall philosophy, and I know you shared with me that you have a personal philosophy, and then your program goals and philosophies. Share that with everyone. What your personal and your program philosophies are. Like when you sit down for an interview, what you sold to the people of Kings Ridge, and what you're instilling in those young people.
Yeah, for sure. So my personal philosophy is relationships over everything else, right? And that understanding that as much as it's a cliche that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It's a cliche for a reason. It's because it matters. It's because it's true, in my opinion. At the end of the day, no one cares how smart I think I am or anything like that, or what I know, if they don't think I'm going to if I'm not going to care about these young men, if I'm not going to do everything I can to serve them and serve this community and serve this program, and so building that trust just in every facet of my life and building those relationships for no selfish gain, for no personal gain of anything, but just to serve. I mean, I'm religious. I'm a Christian, obviously, at a Christian private school, but I do believe that God has put each of us on this earth for a reason, and I think, we're all led to serve and to be living sacrifices for him. And so, understanding that and understanding the bigger purpose and the opportunities that come about every day. And when I talk relationships, it's not just about the guy that I've known for a year or the guy that I work with or whatever. It's the relationship of the kindness I can give to someone that's checking me out at the grocery store, or the server at the restaurant, and understanding that, the opportunities for impact in every kind of exchange and interaction and relationship matters, and how we treat each other, in my opinion. And so, and again, be at living sacrifice and to glorify him. My personal goal is to serve. I do believe servant leadership is the ultimate thing that we can be doing on earth, right? And this idea, we talked about it last week at spring practices, but this idea of selflessness. And, a lot of people think that means thinking, less of yourself or reducing your self-worth, but it's really just thinking about yourself less frequently than you think about others. It doesn't mean that do not have worth as an individual. It does not mean that you do not have value and that you should be underestimating your own value, but that you have to trust that you're going to think about what your needs are less than the needs of your teammates, less than the needs of your brothers and this program, and understanding that piece of it as well, and trusting that your brothers are going to do the same thing for you. And if we all do that, then all of our needs are going to be taken care of. Everything that we're going to want to do as a team or as individuals or just people in a community, whether it's the city you live in, the football program you're a part of, the school you're a part of, if we all have that mentality about it, then everyone's needs are going to be met and everyone's going to feel loved and cared for, and that's kind of how we develop in our program, kind of everything we're about. We got 3 core values that are on everything that we wear. It's called FED, in that order: faith, effort, discipline. So as a program, we're first and foremost faith, again, Christian private school. So our belief in God, and our faith in him, our belief in our teammates. And again, the belief that they're going to be servant leaders and to help serve us, and that they're going to do everything they can to help glorify this team and give their abilities and their energy to our program success on the field and off. And then lastly, belief in our own abilities and what God has blessed us with, right? God has blessed each of us with individual abilities. And again, having that belief in ourselves and belief in that trust in our abilities and what God has given us. And, whether that's the amount of effort he's given us on a given day to go full speed at practice, or that individual, again, that belief in whatever ability he's given us in the classrooms, or to help others and to serve others as well. So in order within faith, obviously God first, then others, and then in myself. Next is effort. So total effort in everything we do. Effort in, obviously practicing games. That's the easy times to be talking and preaching effort. But again, effort in our relationships with each other, right? Effort in how we treat people, whether it's a one-time interaction with somebody, or as somebody that we, see every day, a classmate that may be having some trouble, or, again, effort in our relationships with our teachers to be a positive role model in the classroom, to give our great effort, in the classroom academically, but also to be a positive contributor in the classroom, and a leader in the classroom. Effort in our growing in our faith. I think a lot of people think that, faith and believing just kind of is a natural kind of thing that you don't have to do a lot with, but we believe as a program that you have to put effort towards that faith. You have to be reading scripture regularly. We talk about a verse of the day every day at the end of practice, and just kind of talk about that. And again, actively putting in the effort to continue to grow in our faith, because there's going to be a lot of days that you're going to be pushed and challenged and, struggle sometimes in faith for a variety of reasons, as believers in, on earth. And, so we push that as well. And then last is discipline. So discipline of self, discipline, accountability of others, and then understanding and appreciation of discipline. The first two, everyone understands self-discipline, being where you're supposed to be, doing what you're supposed to do at the right time with the right people, and things like that. Like that's understood, that's taught in most households and in most, situations. Same with holding other people accountable and being willing to do that, and hold your teammates accountable when you see that they're not giving their full effort in a situation. Again, we're used to doing that. A lot of people find that easier sometimes than looking in the mirror and that own self-discipline themselves. So we don't, we talk about that and we communicate that expectation. But that third one, the understanding and appreciation of discipline, is what we talk a lot about, is understanding that, again, if a coach disciplines you, for whatever it is, you didn't run your fake all the way out, right? You're acting up in class, whatever the situation is, understanding and appreciating that coach or that individual who's giving you that discipline is doing it because they love you, right? In my opinion, discipline is the greatest form of love that we can show, because in most situations, it is the most rare form of love, right? It's easy to give love by caring about others and being present and doing those things, but it's difficult sometimes to give the form of discipline that's, in my opinion, is love, because it often means that in that moment, that player or that coach or whoever that is isn't going to like me personally in that moment, and it's the toughest one, again, to give for anybody, right? And so understanding that I will sacrifice you liking me in the short term if I think it's going to make you better in the long term, because I love you that much, right? And I love, the idea of that. Hopefully, you get this understanding of this discipline right away, but it might take a year, 2, 3, 5, 10 years for you to understand why I did that way, to give you that discipline, to understand that's because I love you, right? As a player, or as a coach, or as a person. And so, we talk about that a lot, and that willingness to do that, and understanding and appreciating in that moment, that's a form of love that they're trying to give you, to make you better as a person and grow you as a young man. So
that's good stuff. Outstanding. And
sure.
so, with all that being said, what do the Tigers look like this spring and going into the off season? How do things look going on? I know coming off that 8-4 year, it's probably a whole lot easier getting them going, especially considering it was your first first full region schedule this past year in a long time, wasn't it?
Yeah. So they'd played a 2 years in a row a non-region schedule. This was the first year that we'd kind of been back at a region schedule, kind of with it. And I was kind of given the opportunity. I was offered the job, and in the same breath, they're like, "All right, coach, we'd love to have you be our next head coach. You got about a day to decide if we're going to do a region schedule or a non-region schedule." So, and being, again, 31 years old, and this kind of all happened around Christmas break time, I kind of reflected and prayed on it. And I mean, there wasn't much of a decision, in my opinion. In my opinion, like I told them in the interview, and like I tell our guys, we're going to attack opportunity. Nothing is promised, nothing is given, but we were going to attack every opportunity. And I felt doing another 2-year cycle of a non-region schedule wasn't going to embrace that, as we're coming in and changing this program culture, even if we didn't win a game last year. But the mentality that we had to start kind of getting put in place in this program of understanding that we're going to attack the opportunities. We're not going to run. We're not going to hide. And we're going to, we're going to reap what we sow, and it might take a couple of years. It might take a month. We didn't know. And again, we still don't know. We just attack every day. And, we could lose every game next year. I don't know, but we're going to attack every day, and we're going to keep pushing ahead. Spring was great. We had 44 guys out there. So, again, when I got here, we've had 28. In January of 24, we've upped that number a little bit, obviously, with kids just being excited in the building and wanting to be a part of it. And the program, we have our feeder programs in full swing, which we're thankful for, and got some great feeder coaches down there that did spring ball as well. And again, getting that excitement and generating that energy as well. It's been a great off season so far. I mean, the kids are putting in the work. This has been the first spring that we've had the entire team in the weight room, as part of the school day. And so that's been a blessing, even with guys doing other sports. Obviously, we have a lot of multi-sport athletes, and we're going to modify lifts and do what we need to do on that. But just the mentality of having the kids in the strength class every day and, working on things like that. And again, pushing further and pushing ahead each day. And so spring was great. Played a spring game against Creekside Christian and McDonough, who's also an up and coming program that's building as well. Coach Owens is going in his second year there as well. And, is doing a great job there as well. I think they're in the Gaps League, but he's doing all the right things there as well. And so it's a good opportunity to kind of see where we're at, and play a little bit. I was happy overall with, the perspective of, we did 8 practices and a walkthrough before the spring game, and the kids' energy was high at practice. We were flying around. Again, we take pride in being a physical team. We're not just knocking heads all day at practice or anything like that, obviously with the rules and everything going on, but we take pride in flying around and having the right mentality with every rep, as we keep pushing ahead. So spring was great. Overall happy. I mean, at the end of the day, we had no turnovers at the varsity part of the spring game, which is always my biggest thing, is being disciplined to take care of the football and, kind of executing on that piece. We got plenty to fix. Obviously, no team is perfect in the spring with only 9 days to get ready, really. So, yeah, it was a good start. We're excited for summer, and kind of ready to keep the ground rolling with 7-on-7 and things like that. So we're also a little different. We still go away to a team camp. The first week of August, we go up to the mountains and do, we stay in, this sleepaway camp kind of place that's, already finished their sleepaway camp sessions. It's just us up there, and we can do the 2 days, a couple of those days that, every other day with the rules and all that. And, it's a great opportunity to bond. And, when I talk to the kids, and, meet with them in the spring and do these reflection meetings and things like that, I always ask them, what was good, bad, and ugly about this season, individually and as a team. And I probably had half the kids say, well, camp was hard, but I really felt that it brought us together. He said, it was the first time on a varsity sport that I knew all the freshmen's names, or things like that. And so it's tough, but I do think that shared struggle often forms bonds and forms kind of that unity that we're always trying to form on a team, to a degree as well. And, again, just working towards the common goal, but understanding that there's going to be some struggle. And I mean, it's going to take some hard work, but I think that helped us a lot. And I think we're still trending upward in that direction and got plenty to work on still. So
what are some things that people need to know if they look across and they're getting ready to play the Kings Ridge Tigers this fall? What are some things that they need to be prepared for as far as what kind of team can they expect to play when they're, strapping it up against Coach Slaney's Kings Ridge Tigers, as they say on the Friday night scoreboard show?
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, I would say, again, we take pride in doing everything we can to be physical every play. We talk about that as a program. We talk about that as a team all the way down to our sixth grade feeder is the idea of that, we're going to do everything we can to fly around and play a physical brand of football, and I mean, just be downhill. We're heavy run team. Obviously, we're under center option for the most part. And we are a downhill physical team as part of that. We may not be the biggest team, size-wise, numbers-wise, but we are going to do everything we can, again, to glorify God and how we play this game and use the energy and the abilities that he has given us, and again, working that idea of that selflessness as a team, each individual giving everything they have, every single play, and putting that, forward for the betterment of the program, the betterment of their brothers. We talk about the brotherhood and, every little detail that kind of comes along with that. We have something that we call Brotherhood 8, which is part of our fakes that we count, is the idea of carrying fakes, and the little details that kind of come as part of that. And, everything that we're talking about is about brotherhood and doing things for others that we don't necessarily understand maybe for ourselves, but when you look at the bigger picture, and we always reinforce it on film and show the details, that matter in this, and that we say that's, you're doing it for the brotherhood, you're doing it for that guy to spring a play for him because you sold that fake, or because you took, you climbed that extra 10 yards to go block that safety when you're the offensive tackle, or, you cut off the near deep defender on the backside to spring the touchdown, or whatever it is. And so we always are intentional about highlighting that both in practice, on practice film, but also in the games, obviously. And so, I do think that our guys, are committed. I think our guys, again, play for each other and give everything they have for each other. And again, to be a living sacrifice for God and the abilities that he has blessed each of our kids with. And I think you could say the same about our coaches. Our coaches are going to do everything they can to glorify God. And everything they do in their prep and how they speak to our kids and how they handle situations, and how, on a Friday night, it can be a tense situation. It can be a heightened situation, but we always, keep the bigger thing in perspective, which is that at the end of the day, the game's going to end. And, do you feel like you glorified God? Do you feel like you coached like a living sacrifice to him? And so, and sometimes I'll be the first to say we're all sinners. We all fall short of the glory of God, but that doesn't keep us from striving to pursue that in everything we do. So I would say that's who we are as a program, and kind of understand that about us. And, we just are grateful for the opportunity to play every Friday night. So,
Coach, I'm super excited for you guys this fall, and as you go into year 2, and the enthusiasm that you attack the program with and the opportunities with, as you spoke of. And I just can't wait to see what the future holds for you and your career, and you guys at Kings Ridge and what you're doing up there. It's just awesome. And I sure do appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with us.
Coach, I appreciate it. I'm grateful for the opportunity. And like we talked about a little bit off air, everyone's got a story, and, I know I'm one of the younger coaches, so I'm not blessed yet with all the experience that some of these guys that have been on this show have, but I enjoy listening to all of those guys and hearing their wisdom and trying to gain what I can from that. And, again, I'm just grateful for what you're doing and everyone you're talking to help all of us coaches just grow and get better. So I'm thankful for you.
Thanks, Coach.